Imagine the entire planet decides to come to your country, not for a weekend, for a month. Every national team on Earth, hundreds of thousands of traveling fans, the eyes of billions of people, all pointed at your soil. And it's your job, your country's job, alone, to hold all of it. You have to build the stadiums. You have to build the hotels to sleep them, the roads to move them, the airports to fly them in. You have to feed 1 million visitors, entertain a planet, and put on the single biggest event humanity stages, flawlessly, in front of the whole world. And you have to do it by yourself. That sounds impossible. And yet, for most of football's history, that is exactly how the World Cup worked. One country, one nation, carrying the entire world's game on its back. But look at what's happening right now. The 2026 World Cup doesn't have one host. It has 3. The United States, Canada, and Mexico, spread across 16 cities and an entire continent, because 48 teams and 104 matches are simply considered too much for any single country to handle anymore. So it wasn't always this way. For 72 years, from the very first tournament all the way to 1998, every single World Cup was hosted by one nation, standing completely alone. How on earth did one country host the entire World Cup by itself? To see just how far this idea can be pushed, go right back to the beginning, the first World Cup in 1930. Uruguay didn't just host the tournament alone, they took it to an extreme that seems almost unbelievable now. They hosted the entire World Cup, every team, every match, the whole thing, in a single city, their capital, Montevideo. Think about that. The whole World Championship of football squeezed into one city. And to do it, Uruguay built a brand new stadium specially for the occasion, the Estadio Centenario, a temple of football, as FIFA's president called it. They were so determined to host the world that they poured national pride and money into raising this great arena from the ground, racing against the rain to get it finished. It wasn't even ready until 5 days into the tournament. One country, one city, one stadium at its heart. And with that, Uruguay held the entire planet's game and won it too. That set the template for everything that followed. If you wanted the World Cup, you carried it yourself. And for decades, nation after nation did exactly that. Italy, Brazil, England, Mexico, Argentina, one country at a time, each shouldering the whole tournament alone. It was simply how it was done. There was no other option. You didn't share the World Cup. You bore it. But here's the problem. As football exploded in popularity, the World Cup grew and grew. More teams, more matches, more fans, bigger stadiums, higher demands, and slowly, hosting the whole thing alone stopped being a proud challenge and started becoming a crushing burden, one that not every country could carry. There's a perfect, cautionary example. For the 1986 World Cup, FIFA had chosen a host, Colombia. It was going to be their moment to hold the world, and then Colombia had to do something heartbreaking. They gave it back. The country simply could not afford to build all the stadiums and infrastructure a modern World Cup demanded. The cost of hosting alone had grown beyond what they could bear, and they withdrew. Mexico stepped in to take their place. That was the warning sign. The dream of holding the entire world was becoming so expensive, so enormous, that it could break a nation that tried to do it alone. But if you want to see just how far a single country will go, how much one nation will pour out to host the world by itself, you have to look at the most extreme example of all. The 2022 World Cup was hosted by Qatar, and Qatar is the smallest country ever to stage the tournament. A tiny nation on the edge of the Arabian Desert, with a population smaller than many single cities. And it chose to host the entire World Cup alone. To pull it off, Qatar spent money on a scale the world had never seen. Estimates of the total run to around $220 billion, and by some counts as much as $300 billion. To put that in perspective, the previous World Cup in Russia cost somewhere around $14 billion. Qatar spent roughly 15 times more. It is by an astronomical distance the most expensive World Cup in history. What did they build with it? Almost everything, from scratch. Of the 8 stadiums used, 7 were built brand new for the tournament. They constructed a whole new city, a place called Lusail, which had been empty desert as recently as 2010, purely so it could hold the stadium where the final would be played. They built new highways, a new metro system, upgraded airports, and around 100 new hotels and apartment towers. And here's the truly staggering part. The country was so small that even after all that building, it still couldn't physically house all the fans. So Qatar parked cruise ships in the harbor to use as floating hotels, and it arranged hundreds of shuttle flights every single day, ferrying fans in and out from neighboring countries, people effectively commuting across international borders just to attend the matches, because the host nation itself didn't have room for them all. It's important to say clearly, this came at a real human cost. Building all of this in barely a decade relied on an enormous workforce of migrant laborers, many from South Asia, and there were serious, widely reported concerns about their working conditions and about the number of workers who died during the years of construction. construction. The spectacle the world watched was built on the backs of people whose stories deserve to be remembered too. But as a demonstration of the sheer scale of one country hosting the world alone, nothing has ever come close. Qatar didn't just host a tournament. A tiny desert nation reshaped itself entirely, built cities, fleets, and stadiums, all so that, for 1 month, it alone could hold the whole planet. So let's actually feel what it means for one country to carry the world. You are a single nation, and you make a promise to all of humanity. Come to me, all of you, and I will hold you. For years before a single ball is kicked, your country becomes a construction site. Cranes fill your skyline. Your treasury empties into concrete and steel. You raise arenas that will seat 100,000 strangers. You build beds for 1 million visitors who don't speak your language. You lay roads and rails to carry them, and you brace your entire society for the moment the planet arrives on your doorstep. Then the day comes. The teams land, the fans pour in, and for 1 month, your country stops being just your country. It becomes the beating heart of the entire world, the one place every human eye is turned toward. Every triumph, every disaster, every iconic moment happens on your soil, under your name. And when it's over, when the last fan flies home and the trophy is lifted, you're left standing amid the stadiums you built and the bill you have to pay, having done something almost unimaginable. You, one country, held the world. So if one country carried the World Cup for 72 straight years, what changed? The tournament finally grew too big to carry alone. The first crack came in 2002. For the very first time in history, the World Cup was shared, hosted jointly by 2 countries, Japan and South Korea. And it happened almost by accident. Both nations had been competing to host it, and rather than pick one, FIFA pushed them to do it together. It was messy. 2 organizing committees, a rivalry, and the awkward logistics of splitting a tournament across a sea. Afterwards, FIFA was so unconvinced that it declared co-hosting a one-off and even banned joint bids for a time. But the World Cup kept growing, and eventually the maths became impossible to ignore. As the tournament swelled toward 48 teams and over 100 matches, the cost and scale of hosting it alone became more than almost any single nation could justify. So FIFA's thinking flipped completely. Instead of one country proving it could carry the world by itself, the future became about sharing the weight. That's why 2026 is hosted by 3 countries, and it doesn't stop there. The 2030 World Cup is set to be spread across 6 countries on 3 different continents, a tournament so vast that no single nation, or even 2, could contain it. The age of one country hosting the World Cup alone is quietly coming to an end. And that's the strange, almost poetic truth behind the greatest show on earth. We think of hosting the World Cup as a source of national pride, a prize a country reaches out to claim. And it is. But for most of history, it was something more astonishing than that. It was an act of enormous ambition, one nation choosing to lift the entire planet's greatest event onto its own 2 shoulders and carry it, alone. From Uruguay building a single temple of football in a single city, to a tiny desert nation raising whole cities out of the sand. The story of hosting alone is really the story of how much one country will pour out, how much money, how much concrete, how much of itself, just to hold the world for 1 month. And now, the World Cup has grown so vast that it has finally escaped the grasp of any single country. In 2026, it takes 3 nations to do what Uruguay once did in one city. 3 countries, an entire continent, to hold what a single capital once held. The World Cup didn't just outgrow its stadiums, or its old formats, or its trophies. In the end, it outgrew the countries themselves. It became too big for any one of us to hold alone.